Now we'll turn to the case of Hubbell Homes versus Key. Hubbell Homes versus Key is a complicated case if you read the whole thing, but most casebook editors edit out the portions having to do with consequential damages, incidental damages, and some of the arguments of the parties and the court's response to those arguments. So we're going to look at the basics. The basics are these. Mr. and Mrs. Key were reassigned, at least Mike was, the husband was reassigned in his job to a location, and at that location he wanted to buy a new home. Well, the people who employed him said, we'll give you 1 year of relocation rental expense. Okay. Well, Mike Key decided, let's move into the house that we're going to buy, ask the builder, owner, if he would delay our purchase for 1 year so we can take advantage of all this free money, free rent, and then at the end of the year we'll buy it. So they negotiated that, and they negotiated a purchase price of $376,900. The closing date was then delayed for a year. There was a rental agreement, of course, for the 1 year in between, and the rental agreement had a provision that at the end of the year, the Keys would purchase that house for that price, $376,900. And that price, of course, is a fixed price, and the builder, Hubbell Homes, had the right, according to the document, to force the sale at that price, or to have a court enforce it. So eventually, well, partway through the rental agreement, he was terminated by the company, and at the end of the rental agreement, he was able to negotiate a few more months of rent, which I suppose he paid, but then at the end of a few months, he was stuck having to buy the house. Well, I think at that point he was unemployed. He turned to the owner, Hubbell, and said, look, will you finance this? We can do it two ways. One, on a contract of sale. That's where the title stays with the owner-builder, and the buyer pays monthly payments. And when those monthly payments add up to enough, and agreed upon enough, 50, 60, 80, 100%, whatever it may be, then the title will transfer to the buyer. Or Hubbell Homes offers financing. Would you just finance this for me? In other words, lend me the money to buy the house from you, and I will have title, and you'll have a mortgage or a deed of trust, whatever's permitted in the state of Iowa. Well, that was the deal. And of course, they didn't purchase the house. I say of course because it's in your case book, so there must have been litigation, and indeed there was. And the case is in your book because of the question of what are these expectation damages that Hubbell Homes may be entitled to. Now first, let's look at the claim for consequential and incidental damages. Hubbell Homes asserts that it has a tremendous amount of damages, $70,494.58 in consequential and incidental damages. In other words, as a result of your not buying the house, in addition to those expectation damages that we're entitled to, we lost a lot of money in other ways that are related to the sale or non-sale breach. So that's not in the text, at least the one I'm looking at, because we're focusing on the expectation damages. That is, we're focusing on what was Hubbell entitled to. Hubbell suggested, it's entitled to the difference between the contract price and the cost to build the home. Well, the cost to build the home was, I'll use rough numbers, $340,000. So you subtract that from the purchase price that they had agreed to of close to $377, and you come off with a number that is much larger than the difference between the agreed upon price and the market price at the time of the breach. The court says general damages are measured by the difference between the contract price and the fair market value of the real estate on the date of the breach. Hubbell says that's not going to be enough to compensate me for my losses, because Hubbell says the ultimate purpose of the whole deal here, being able to sue and give damages, expectation damages, isn't it to put me in a place that I would have occupied if the contract had been performed? So I built the house for this much, $340,000, and I would have been with a, what do you see here, about a $36,000 profit if he had followed through, but he didn't. Well, the court says, no, sorry. And the reason why in this case is that there was an established fair market value of the house, because shortly after the Keys said they're not going to buy it, they're breaching the contract, Hubbell received an offer of $350,000, and it accepted that offer. The offer eventually fell through. So, at the time of trial, the court says the fair market value must be, last we know of, $350,000, because that's what a buyer offered you and that's what you accepted. That's the fair market value. Now, as to this other value, if you want us to determine the value of the difference between what it costs you to build the house and what the Keys had promised to pay for it, can't do that, because Hubbell was not able to prove the amount of its lost profits beyond its conjecture that it would have lost every possible profit dollar. You see, Hubbell might sell the house next week after trial for $400,000, make a tremendous profit. It's speculative as to what the house will sell for in the future, and the court says we can't go along with that. When it's conjecture, it's based on speculative and uncertain calculations. No, not going to do that. Court says we must deny recovery of lost profits because it is speculative and uncertain whether and in what amount these damages will be sustained. And for those reasons, the court concludes the proper measure of general damages in this case is the difference between the fair market value of the home and the contract price. The fair market value of the home, $350,000, because that was the last, most recent offer they received and accepted. So the offer and acceptance to sell the home, the court says, at this price is evidence of the market value of the home. That is what this court says is expectation damages. Notice that the court may have awarded the larger damages that were being asked for, but it could not because of the conjecture, that is, Hubbell saying, well, we deserve the amount between what we built it for and the actual price of the house to the Keys. And the court says, no, you may sell it for more than that and thus gain a lot more profit. This would be a windfall for you. Can't do that. It's based on conjecture. What would the house sell for eventually? Maybe Hubbell should have waited until he actually sold that house. How does that work? Well, if the plaintiff enters into a substitute transaction, a court may compare the terms of that transaction to the terms of the breached contract. But in this case, of course, Hubbell Homes still owned the house. No substitute transaction had occurred by the time of trial. Therefore, measurement of the damages suffered by Hubbell by referring to a substitute transaction was not an available option. In this case, the market value was easy to determine.